Okay, Lauren, whenever you're ready. Whoever's back there, I think it's Lauren.
It's Denise.
Is it Denise?
Yes.
Thank you, Denise. Good evening. Welcome to the City of Bettendorf Committee of the Whole meeting. Today is Monday, December 6, 2021. It's 5:00 p.m. Thank you all for joining us. We have a presentation and a consent agenda item. We're going to flip those so that we can do a real quick presentation by our city planner, Taylor Beswick. Thank you for being here, Taylor, and our city attorney, Chris Curran. This is consent agenda item B. Gentlemen, you have the floor. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of council. Wait till it pops up here.
Oh, I hate this button.
Up for us.
So I've got it up for me. So we need to have Denise help us with
I've got it up.
Yeah, that's the
It's
point.
up at our desk.
This one has to be switched.
There you go. Yep.
There we go. Awesome.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right, so presenting here the new proposed districts, ward districts and precincts. This is done after the recent, or 2020 census, done every 10 years. This census was delayed a bit due to the pandemic, so we did not get our census numbers until just actually in late August, initial numbers. And then, of course, we can't do anything until the state legislator adopts their districts, and we go down from there. Start off, just some context. Here's some of the census results, some of the census results. Bettendorf grew 17.7%, just under 40,000 at 2020. This is quite a big jump, the biggest jump percentage-wise in the history of the city. I also, housing units, the census does take housing units and demographics, 15.7%, so also quite a big jump, over 2,000 new housing units, so that's apartments and single family as well. Compared, here's the top 7 Quad City populations, and you can see Davenport, Moline, now Bettendorf, number 3 in the Quad Cities for total population. Rock Island, East Moline, Silvis, and Eldridge. It's kind of an overall comparison, some regional numbers. Statewide, comparing, well, Scott County and statewide, you can see this map here. This shows, the red shows decline in population, so a lot of rural to urban, which has been the trend the last couple, or more than couple censuses. Scott County did grow overall. Major metro areas grew, especially Des Moines metro area. Overall in Scott County, Bettendorf, we're down here. So Eldridge, LeClaire, and Bettendorf were at the top. So our region of Scott County really experienced a lot of growth in total population. But county average was overall 5.7 and a total county change of just under 9,500. So using these numbers, staff was tasked with drawing new precincts, which make up the wards. Precincts are the voting districts. The standards are set by the Secretary of State and state code. Precincts cannot be more than 3,500. They must lie within one legislative district, so all precincts have to be in one ward, have to be one state house district and congressional district. They have to be composed of a contiguous territory, follow what's called census block boundaries. So these are the smallest geography that the census aggregates population by. This comes into play with areas that had no or very low population in the last census and now have larger populations. The census blocks might be geographically quite large, while other areas of town, such as our older areas, will have smaller geographic area. Other requirements per state code: they must serve voter convenience and promote electoral efficiency. This goes to we can't create precincts just to create precincts. They have to be, we have to try to minimize the number of precincts, and also include any city annexed territory from the last census. In our case, we had 2 areas, one down off of State Street on our far southeastern border with unincorporated Scott County. And then also we had quite a larger area, but it was all farmland up that was partially annexed from the city of Davenport and Scott County due to access to that land on the very northwest boundary. For wards are our legislative districts in the city. We have 5 wards, as you know. They have to follow the precinct boundaries. So using those precinct standards, we have to fit those in within these wards. Also composed of contiguous territory and compactness. So that's all in state code. And then they also have to be of a similar population. So in this case, their total population divided by the wards. So our ideal population for each ward, which we were shooting for, is about 7,820. State law does allow up to a 10% variance in this regard, but we were well under that threshold. Lastly, the following items were not and cannot be taken into consideration when drawing ward boundaries: addresses of the incumbents, political affiliations of registered voters, past election results, and any other demographic information beyond census head count. So only total head counts we're taking, each person, no matter if they're voting age or not, and any other demographic information cannot be taken into consideration. To touch on this is what staff was given for deadlines. October 28th, the state legislature looked at their second set of maps, which are drawn by a bipartisan committee they're headed by a bipartisan committee drawn by the state legislative service agency. They voted to adopt those maps. We have 60 days from that day as a city to then adopt our ward boundaries. Those were approved on October 28th, 60 days. That makes that date December 28th. In a normal year or a normal census and ward redistricting, we would get these census numbers in the spring, and then we would have till September to adopt. Because this has never happened, to my knowledge, of the census data being released this late, we're kind of under a very short timeline here. So December 28th is when we have to have adopted by, and on January 15th, per state code, they'll become effective. Here's some of the results from the wards. I mentioned they have to be of equal population. So in 2010, here's on the far left column, we were at 33,346, and those are the populations of each ward. Using those same boundaries, the current ones that are adopted, the populations are such for each ward. You can notice there's over 11,000 in Ward 5. So staff had to take a lot of geographic area out of there to balance those. Ward 4 as well. Actually, all the wards grew, so that we had to balance those out. So the populations in each proposed ward are in the third column. And then the difference from that target number that I mentioned, the total population of the city divided by 5, these are the differences. So we got within under 3% within the target, which is really good. Ward 5 has the biggest variation or difference from deviation from that target. But I will mention that this census was taken in April of 2020. We all know that I know of a few subdivisions that have already been built and populated since then. So that's where our undeveloped land is, and that's where it's growing. Now, take a look at the actual map. So here on the screen, we have the new proposed wards. And I can show you.
While he's working that up, I just would kind of plug in for a new tool we're using here. So instead of using static maps, we're actually pulling up our GIS live, which is nice. And that's been done a lot to the part of Taylor and our IT staff. So being able to do this and not use a PDF map where we're trying to zoom in and out, but actually use the live GIS later is a real improvement for us.
Yeah, and if you'd like me to zoom in on any areas and this is this can be accessed by you just through the link on my presentation, which can be shared. So this is can be viewed by anybody.
Taylor, we don't want them launching any missiles, so just let them use the static maps.
The yellow lines on the map are the former wards boundaries, and then the colored transparent layers are the new proposed wards. So I can point out just a few of the areas where the major changes occurred. Ward 1 and Ward 3 area just north of Central Avenue was formerly in Ward 3, now going to Ward 1. Other areas, there was a lot of Devil's Glen Road, Middle Road area, all was formerly Ward 5 going east. That is now going all to Ward 3. Same goes for a smaller area that was formerly in Ward 4, just south of Tanglefoot, west of Devil's Glen, is now going to Ward 3 as well. And then all north of Riverdale, North Scott Community College, Belmont, I believe, that's all going to zoom out here again, Ward 3. And then southwest of the roundabout, west of Mill Road, south of 53rd, that area, formerly Ward 5, now going to Ward 4. And this was all based on that high population that Ward 5 district now has with the old or the current map boundaries. So we had to balance those out. One small caveat, the city of Panorama Park is shown in the ward. It is not, it's its own incorporated city. But the Secretary of State, as they did in 2011, does mandate that mandates that they incorporate in our precincts. Thus, they don't have to have tens of thousands of dollars of extra voting equipment and volunteer voting elector staff to run a precinct just for that city. So they'll be in our precinct, which I can show you those as well if you're interested. But they won't vote for our city elections or any referendums, any such.
I didn't ask this question when you mentioned it the other day. Will they be getting a different bill for that, or is that coming to our bill?
Good question. That would be a question for the auditor's office.
I think I'll call her
Make a
tomorrow.
note to remind ourselves.
Can you zoom out a little bit?
Yep.
Sorry.
And I can take let me know if you want anything. And I will mention, so that target population was 7,800, a little more. Each precinct can only have 3,500 people. Now each ward has over double that. So we need only one ward had 3 precincts, Ward 2. The reason for that is the State House district boundary for, I believe, the 94th and the 95th House district runs down the middle of Bettendorf, basically, to the west middle. So we cannot create a precinct going across that boundary line. And that's what it was like in 2011, and it is now the same for 2022. So you have a precinct here, precinct 3 in the Ward 1, that's going to be east of that line, and I believe it's precinct 3, Ward 2, east of that line. But just by population, it necessitated the creation of 4 additional precincts. So each ward now has 3 voting precincts. And this has already gone through the county auditor's office. They have done their review, and they approved them. We have to sign an agreement with the county for the Panorama Park precinct agreement. But that'll go after we get this approved by council and then to the Secretary of State. So it's after that process.
So can I just jump in just to sort
Chris
of,
can follow then.
yeah, to just sort of clarify some of the timing issues. And first, I'd like to thank Taylor and Mark and the whole team for an outstanding job. I mean, this was a lot of work in a short period of time, and so thank you for that. So on the timing of this, as Taylor mentioned, the auditor has looked at this, has approved it. Because of the tight timeline that Taylor mentioned and the 60-day window that we are bound by under state law, we're setting this for public hearing at the next council meeting, at which time the first and final reading of the ordinance will be read, should you decide to approve it, which we would certainly recommend. And so once it is city law, it will then be transmitted to the Secretary of State for their certification, and which I think is a relatively short period of time. And then the final sort of procedural step is that it is required, once the Secretary of State certifies it, it's required to then be published in a newspaper for 3 consecutive weeks. That needs to be completed by the next general election, so in October of '22. So there's this process of making the law and getting it certified, and then there will be a communication period, which will, by law, require the state publication or the newspaper publication. But also, I think, in connection with the auditor, we'll have to work with them. We'll want to make sure that all of these things are made public and that everybody knows where they vote and what ward they are now in, and those sorts of things. So that's sort of just the next steps. Yes.
Anything else on the presentation, or do we want to go to questions?
No, I can take any questions. Yeah.
Okay, Jerry?
A question to follow up to Chris's comments here. So will the auditor be sending out a new card then to those people? I assume so.
I believe so. Yes, that would be their responsibility, but I believe that would be the case.
So the people will be notified, the voters will be notified of the change?
Yes.
And we talked about trying to find maybe whatever best way to communicate it. Maybe it's a mailing to just those who have changed or moved or whatever. But we'll continue to effort along those lines. That just costs some significant money. Scott?
In the way I understand it, some people that were, I can take my ward for instance, that were within my ward this year didn't have a city election. They're now in 4th Ward that had a city election this year, so they won't then vote for a city election for 4 more years. So they'd be a 6-year turnaround.
These become
essentially.
effective at the next election. They become effective January
January.
15th.
Yeah.
And then the next election is next fall.
So those people would have not voted in a city election for 6 years, if that's the way I understand it, correct?
They will have been,
Definitely get skipped.
yeah, that will be the case. I mean, they will have been represented all throughout. It might just be they're in a different ward, but, yep.
They'll have aldermen at larges.
What was that?
They'll have aldermen at larges.
Yeah. And then, do we know, is there gonna be 3 locations? Do they have to have 3 separate voting locations within each area, or can,
So
for instance, can Surrey Heights still have 2 precincts at 1?
So at the waterfront in the last election, there were several precincts in the same building.
Yeah.
So I think if I recall, Jerry, the first ward had 2 or 3 precincts, but there were polling locations that covered 2. So we'll check that with the auditor, but we know that happened at least on 1 occasion.
We had both precincts at the library.
Okay.
That's correct.
And the part of the auditor's review was that electoral efficiency, and they do look to see if these precincts have maybe some area that they can have a place to vote, and that was mentioned. And he said that it's their responsibility. It's not ours. we can suggest, I think. And then we did that in 2011, but,
I know there's some laws on polling places and making.
and
it
that has
accessible
changed, I
that they
think, maybe.
added.
So that's the auditor's office, yeah.
Yeah, that's the only questions I had.
Other questions? Okay. Well, Taylor and Mark, Chris, thank you very much for your work. Great job anticipating what our legislature might do so that you had some maps and some ideas available. We appreciate that and your efficiency. If you have questions about the maps, make sure you get to these folks. Make sure you get them answered before we have the opportunity to vote on the same, because as you heard, you're going to get that one shot. And if we're solid on the maps and our questions are answered, fine. But if not, get your questions answered. Yes, Greg?
I just, I have at home now a pretty good sized map of Fourth Ward.
We'll get a new one.
We get those?
We'll get a new one.
Greg, that one's going to become obsolete?
The old one?
Historical now.
Recycle.
Oh, it's
Historical, yeah.
historical.
And Your Honor, I'd just jump in a little bit that if
Took him a
there's,
minute, didn't it? He just went right face like, uh-oh, what have I done?
if there's uncomfortability doing a first and only reading, we could set a special meeting, but we still got to Taylor's point, I think we have to adopt by December 28th. So we'd have to, around the holidays, you'd have to come back in. So we're recommending that we have a first and final reading once we have the public hearing.
Well, I think you've got 2 weeks to look at it, so look at it. If you have questions or concerns, make sure you get those answered. And if you have something you want to say, talk to the rest of us. If there's a change that you're suggesting, we need to know about that. I don't think this is the type of thing that kind of gets changed on the fly, but we really don't want to attempt to do that at the next meeting, given our deadlines. Thank you very much for your presentation. Nice job, everybody.
Good job.
Let's move.
Best not to change.
Let's move to determine if you want to keep this on as consent agenda B as in boy for tomorrow night.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we're going to set the public hearing tomorrow night on our consent agenda as item B. Let's move to our 2022 5-year capital improvement program and financing. For this, we welcome our Finance Director, Jason Schatt, and our Public Works Director, Brian Schmidt, as well as our City Engineer, Brent Morlock, who looks like he is in the hot seat, ready to rock and roll.
Ready to roll, Your Honor.
Thank you, three, and your staffs for your work on this document and what you propose to us today. You have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think talking about tremendous growth in Bettendorf is a great kickoff to this CIP because there's a lot going on, as you well know, and a lot is kind of coalescing here over the next couple of years. So we're going to walk you through the major projects on the horizon tonight. Again, the CIP in its fullest form certainly isn't fully adopted until you've adopted the budget come March. But our process here tonight is to get you familiar with kind of the larger buckets of money within the CIP so that you can make a decision on the upcoming debt sale, which we have pushed this year out to March 1st. We've typically been selling debt right around now the last few years in the first week of December, but found for several reasons that the March date worked better this year. Gives you some more time to spend with the CIP. We don't anticipate any penalty and interest rates over that period. So we've kind of pushed that out as a way to kind of give us some more time to work with the CIP this year. So with that, I think we'll just dive in. Hit the highlights. Brent is here to talk about the programs that he knows far better than I do, and a lot of the projects. So right there on page 1.
Perfect. There are copies of any of the maps that I'll bring up at the very end, or if we need to reference them at your stations. There's an alley map. There's our usual arterial map that you've seen before that has been reworked to fit our dollar amounts. There's also 2 maps that we've never prepared before. There's a residential reconstruction and resurfacing map. Wanted you to be able to see all of what your investment over the last 5 years has gotten you. There's been a lot of work that's been done, a lot of streets. And then the final map that just kind of all gray is all streets and all alleys that have been done over the last 5 years. So all for your use. If you got any specific questions, I can bring those up here. Otherwise, we will get started. So first category here, the I74 commitment. Obviously, with the bridge opening, we are getting closer to winding down the projects. However, we do still have several large projects to come over the next couple of years. We've got the urban park and landscaping to be let next spring and be constructed. Then we also have the letdown structure, as you're aware that we were granted our waiver. That will not be let until the end of '22, fall of '22, for construction in '23. Biggest line item here is the very first one. We had to pull forward. That dollar amount has not changed at $750, but it was out a year further. With some progress that's been made, we had to adjust that and bring forward some of that money. So that will cover the extra rock excavation that you authorized to be able to get the true wet pond. You've seen that work going on. They're making pretty good headway. Then there's also some additional funding there for some signage and fountains and lighting, all to be determined, in the next basically year and a half. We'll get the wet basin done, get all the rock X, and then, it's gonna run into winter, unfortunately. So we'll get started with the fountains and the electrical work in the spring.
Brent,
Yes, sir.
it is true that IDOT is splitting the cost of that extra rock
Correct.
excavation with us.
Yep, there was a supplement to the 74 agreement that was approved either the last meeting or the meeting before, but yes, it's estimated right at about $500,000, 225, 30,000 for each.
Thank you.
Brent, explain this to me. In your out unfunded years, you've got this blue line going back to the others. So we still, after the payments that you show, 21, 2, 2, 3, all the way up through 4, 5, have an additional 4.149 that we need to program.
It's a little bit of Jason's formatting, so
I'll
let him explain that.
interpret that the best I can, Your Honor.
Please.
The unfunded column is a column that runs throughout the whole document.
Right?
We didn't really have an appropriate place to put the budget for the I-74 work. So that 4.1 is actually what you see broken out over the years.
Those are the program dollars at the bottom. If I add those together, they equal the 4.1. So it's not an additional 4.1 unfunded later down the road.
Correct.
It's actually funded how you've suggested, so long as we pass it each year in this area here, about 830,000, but the 1 year at 1.3.
Absolutely correct.
All right, I feel much better, thank you. I thought I was right, but I wanted to hear it.
The 830,000 is actually significantly lower than we originally projected yearly. We've kind of been working with the DOT annually to adjust because we are paid ahead at this
Okay.
point for work that's been done.
Thank you.
If we could ever get a document that the finance people and the people who do the work could agree upon, it could be something we could all understand. It would be a wonderful thing. But that would be nirvana and I wouldn't be here.
Community and economic development next. The big one
But where
there
would you
is the
be?
flood mitigation grant. Mark, I don't know if you want to comment on, or Jason on the,
Yeah, lines 17 through 19
Items.
is phase 3 of that Duck Creek flood zone buyout with the federal aid, state aid, and then our local match being made up with sales tax. And Mark can certainly comment on that project if
So we,
we've covered that one pretty well.
Yeah, I think we're up to speed, but certainly you feel free.
I would just say that as of a week and a half ago, we clicked submit on our grant submission, and so we are in for round 3 and waiting on the good word from FEMA and the state of Iowa.
I kind of liked it, Brent. I didn't know what it was and where you were going with it, but
That's
kind of
how-
liked it.
That's how sensitive the screen is. It puts my paper next to it. Next 2 buckets funding, miscellaneous public works, just a few of our smaller ones. Nothing has changed there. Typical annual programs. I guess
The
one item.
retaining wall restoration is for our retaining walls.
Correct. I did want to mention that line item 23. We do have a wall on 15th Street behind the Abbey that has failed, actually failed about a year ago. We've had to work with the Mid-American. We got a gas line that's 2 foot behind the wall. They finally got out and relocated that. Plans are done, so that'll get bid this year and be reconstructed in the
And
spring.
we own that property, that's our wall.
We own that wall, correct.
Okay.
Changing wall designs as we're going forward. These smaller block landscape walls are really not the way to go. So we're using large gravity block walls moving forward. So they got that line item. Bridge maintenance program.
Brent, have you guys done an assessment of the rest of the walls that are ours in the
We
city?
have not. We probably actually need to, I might have to just send a staffer out to try to figure out which ones are ours. The biggest one we know is obviously the Crow Creek Road retaining wall, and we've been monitoring that. We've got some improvements with some drainage that we're gonna do in the spring on the top to try to mitigate the runoff from the field there, but that's the biggest one remaining.
So Brent, item 36, the sidewalks, you show 200 all in 1 year there.
We're just through
Hold on just a
33.
sec,
Hold
Jerry,
on
we're
a
gonna-
sec.
I just wanted to touch on the bridge maintenance program as
We know
well.
we want to talk about sidewalks.
Here, Jason, quick,
Yeah.
which two lines are we actually bonding for? It's on either side, right?
Yeah, so obviously from a financial perspective,
This is my point.
we have to budget over fiscal years. Engineers like to budget for construction years, which I completely understand. And as much as Brent and I have talked about finding some kind of mechanism to make that all work, we haven't found
You
it
have to
just
find
yet. So what you see here is fiscal year plans. We will be bonding here in March for construction year 22. So the light green column that is titled FY 21-22, January 1 through June 30th, plus the light blue column titled FY 22-23, July 1 through December 31st. In general, that's what we're bonding for. Now, by the time we get out to, FY 22-23, there may be some shuffling back and forth between those columns. But in general, you're bonding for the second half of FY 21-22 and the first half of FY 22-23, all encompassed within construction season 22.
22. So on the bridge maintenance program, only thing I wanted to point out, lines 28 and 29, just to keep those, actually that's a typo. It should have been the 18th Street Bridge over Duck Creek. Those are our two worst bridges at this point. With Indiana being wrapped up, we had a very successful project out there. That was all 100% funded through a national grant program, almost $1 million bridge. Those are our next two bridges that we'll be applying for funding for. There are two worst rated bridges.
Full replacement?
They would have to be full replacement, correct?
Anything in the new infrastructure? We don't have the rules yet, but obviously you're on it.
Yeah, there's definitely some bridge money.
Yes,
I
there
would
is.
I would anticipate possibly another round like Iowa was. That's how we got that Indiana project. Iowa was classified as a rural community, and we were $37 million across the state for bridges. It was a competitive grant program, but clearly we've done well in it. And if there's another one, I would expect possibly to be applying under that as well.
Excellent, thank you. All right, Jerry, here we go to sidewalks.
Sidewalks. So right off the bat on sidewalks, we do have our standard funding, our buckets there, $250,000 a year. We did have a larger program this year, if you remember, Jerry, because we did not have a program in 2020 with COVID and uncertainty with funding. We did save that money, so we had a over $400,000 project this year. We do have a few. We've kind of restructured a few other things in here. I know we've been hesitant about any other standalone rec trail projects. So there are a couple shown as unfunded that we've heard from the public, also from the Bettendorf Trails Committee. The Devil's Glen Rec Trail to expand the existing 5 or 6 foot walk that's on the east side of Devil's Glen between Middle and Belmont. They'd like to see that to get to a 10-footer. And then I'm anticipating the need for the Middle Road connection from Hopewell to Forest Grove in a year and a half when we have all the new trails out at Forest Grove. So that's also a placeholder there.
Again, Brent, I always bring this up, but if we are, as you go through these programs, each year, if one needs to go down some, don't just say, okay, we programmed this amount of money. We got to find a new project to plug in because we're 200,000 short. Because there may be another program, if we're done with alleys or if we need to slow down and get it on an arterial like a Middle or a Forest Grove or whatever, and I'm not suggesting those just because they're in the 5th, Bill. I'm just saying if there's, that there's something big and you need something, but you really don't need it in alley or resurfacing or sidewalk, do that for us. Use your best judgment, because I think if you explain it to us, we don't like the fact that we just put money in a bucket to go use. Does that make sense?
Yep, no, I absolutely do. I will say we spend every dollar
I
at this
understand.
point. But if we do on some larger projects.
But if there's a
we would, of
rating
course, go there.
system or a way to look at this and go, hey, this is much more important. And maybe it is an alley, I don't know. We're aggressive there.
And I think when we get to the alleys here in a second, you'll be able to see the success that program really has had. I want to go back, Jerry, what was the question you had on the sidewalk program?
Why you were putting so much money into it next year compared to our annual program?
So next year's in 2021, or I'm sorry, 2022 is still the exact same amount. It's $250,000. which has been our
Oh, okay.
annual
50
program.
plus 200.
Yep, so if you look at line item 36 there, you'll have the two columns that Jason referenced. So a total of 250, so we're back to normal budget dollars there.
The question would be the next year you go to 300,000.
That FY, good catch. So what the 50,000 is just pulling forward, since we don't break out the out years into 6-month increments, that's just showing that we will need a $50,000 amount out of that, and then the second half would get adjusted. We'll keep it at 250.
Yeah. So it's at 250 currently, that
Yes.
every year going on.
Okay, thank you.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say,
Lisa.
just kind of what you were saying, just, I'd say to everybody on council, keep an open mind as far as the bike trail going out to Forest Grove. I know I've had comments as far as, you know, kids or whatever out with Betplex, TBK, you know, and then if we've got the other corner developing, as far as getting out there, we don't have the, you know, a bus going out there or anything, but just, you know, we're gonna need a route going out there.
One of
so-
the things too, Alderman Brown, is that we're gonna be having two 10-foot sidewalks, two 10-foot wide sidewalks incorporated into the Forest Grove Road reconstruction project. And Brent, can you maybe fill in exactly the limits of those?
Yeah, so that's why that, I think Lisa's hitting the nail on the head. That missing connection, so we stop at Hopewell right now. We will need to make that connection up to Forest Grove, because we'll continue from where we're at International, where the trail leads off, and run that through the entire length of our federal aid reconstruction project there.
Right.
So there will be a critical gap there that exists. And
And I-
potentially.
Forest Grove, when it gets funded, would continue all the way to
Right.
the terminus
Yep,
of the city.
and
there.
get it to the school, get the trail there. But yes, continue the road project.
And I'm just throwing it out, as, you know, there might be examples of something that comes up
Yeah.
somewhere.
Very true.
So next in line, alley rehab, as we're talking. So this would probably be a good time to take a look at the alley map. But we're on year 6 of the program. We have completed to date 40 alley segments of the 63, yes, 63 asphalt segments that exist. I know the alley program gets bandied around a little bit, but it has really been a very successful program. We get quite a bit of praise for this one. Davenport, I can tell you, has looked at adopting the exact same method that we're using. Some of the other cities have. We are projecting, however, that you can see 16 segments left, not counting next year's. I think in 4 years, we're done with all the asphalt alleys. That is well ahead of where we were. You know, we were prior to Brian coming on board and making the change. We were doing 2 a year, if that, 1 or 2 a year. You know, we're doing 6 to 7 a year at this point. So I would strongly urge you to consider funding that at the same level to get us through the rest of the asphalt ones, and then I think that dollar pot could go back into other programs.
Clearly, we picked the ones that needed it the most. My
Yep,
point is,
absolutely.
if you're gonna go fix an alley that doesn't need it, or is on a, you know what I mean? You can just move your money, just make sure
We do have a
you're.
rating system that we developed for that. And, you know, as we're getting down to some of these last ones, they're not gonna require full reconstruction. We'll still do all the aprons, so we're consistent with what everybody's getting, but some of them do actually have a little bit of base that we can utilize.
Okay,
So based on new ward maps, I'm giving up quite a few alleys to Alderman Sexer.
Thank you, Bill.
What I'd like to do is take that money that I had and move it over to the 3rd ward, if that's
horse
possible. Jason, if you can manage that.
So next is a street resurfacing program, and I think Jason, this is probably a good time to touch on the overall bonding amount and what we're projecting out.
Right, so as I said at the top, we have a lot happening, obviously, to keep our foot on the gas and promote that growth that's so important. And I think we had kind of laid the groundwork with you previously in the year that this would be a good year to do $10 million in bonding. And for that, with that extra million, what Brent has proposed here, on top of the detention pond at I74, is to really increase the investment in the street resurfacing program and the street reconstruction program that we'll get into on the next page. But you can see in the street resurfacing program, line 47 has been increased from its usual $1 million funding to 1,250,000. That's with an asterisk. I've got another 250,000 coming from road use to supplement this program, so it'll be $1.5 million a year in resurfacing. And that money would be targeted towards residential streets,
Strictly.
interior of the city, streets that we haven't been able to get to while we've been focusing on arterials.
So I'm gonna bring up the resurfacing and reconstruction map. We've had to kind of shift our thinking in terms of construction. If you look at, say, 2016, for example, that's up there, there's a lot of red streets. You can see we did a lot of streets in 2016. And part of the reason was that we were able to really do, in the resurfacing program, just mill and fill. So you're grinding off 2 inches, you're putting 2 inches back, and you get a lot of streets done. We got as many of those done as we could, and then we started running into some really bad streets that had no base. So Fair Lane and Timberline and some other streets up in that area. And we had to shift our thinking, and the resurfacing program for a few years became basically a full-depth asphalt reconstruction program. We had to. We couldn't utilize what was there. We were burying machines, and we were lucky that some of those streets didn't collapse. So we've gotten through a lot of those asphalt streets that now got new curb and gutter, full-depth asphalt. And we're hoping to get back to a little more of a traditional resurfacing program this year and going forward. So I think you're gonna see a lot more streets. The map still shows we did a ton of work, but it's gonna be even more. And then if we're able to increase that program amount by another $500,000, moving forward, really gonna attack these residential streets. On the street reconstruction, same deal. We've added $500,000, as Jason said. We do have some streets, since these take longer to plan, we do have streets picked out for next year. You can see the 4 or 5 there that we're starting to work on design. Always can be shifted around if something else is needed. Diamond grinding.
Oh, I was just gonna point out lines 55 through 58 are the ones programmed to start
Yep,
this
correct.
year. Finished by the.
And that is still operating under the $1 million of total funding, not the 1.5. Full depth patching is split in a couple sections throughout the CIP, but that is a total of $1 million. So as we look at the maps, if I can flip back to that again, the all street map down here, the last one, well, the gray. Something to keep in mind is that's streets and alleys, but that does not include over $5 million in patching that we have done. That's just impossible to tabulate on a map. So that patching dollars is strictly residential as well. So we are still doing, in my opinion, a very good job of getting into the residentials while also addressing our larger arterial needs.
Brent,
Yeah.
you got Devil's Glen is done, but
So
it
that-
was only really patched.
The patching, correct. So on the arterial map, Scott, you can see that's still got the plan for the overlay. So just wanted to indicate how much,
So that's why you got,
2 lines next to each
technically it's
other.
completed, but then you're gonna do the overlay.
Yep. Didn't want to lose the fact that we invested, well over $1 million in patching on there.
And waiting that long before you overlay it isn't a concern?
It's in really good shape. It's really holding up. The ride is one thing. You're going to have that when you patch, but it's a much better condition than middle ever was. So not worried that pushing it out a few years to knock off some other streets that really need some attention before it.
That goes back to the mayor's discussions earlier in regards to shifting the priorities, and we feel that by shifting some of the priorities, moving the resurfacing back on Devil's Glen and pushing up into the residentials, which was kind of a resounding message that we kind of received when we were going through goal setting, that's what we landed on.
All right. Last one is on this particular section, city parking lot. We have upped this a little bit. It was previously 100,000. We've moved it up to 150,000. We've just got most of our small parking lots that we've been able to take care of. But the remaining ones are probably going to exceed that $100,000. So we're trying to give ourselves a little more budget. We do tentatively have planned for construction year 2022 to do the Life Fitness Center parking in the parking lot to the east of that building. Okay, arterial collectors. Line 75 and 76, and really 77, is the bulk of our year next year. I'm sure you're aware, Forest Grove is going to be a massively large project and is consuming a large portion of our budget. We are finalizing right-of-way acquisition right now. Just half hour ago, I got a few purchase agreements in. We'll have that wrapped up in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Waiting on some DOT comments from the 90% review. And we should be on a March letting. There's a chance that it pushes to April because the DOT is unfortunately very far behind. So the DOT lays out a calendar of all submittals for, you pick your letting and then you backtrack when your submittals are due. We've hit them all, and the DOT unfortunately says there's 30 or 40 projects. They're really not staffed properly. So we're pushing them to get our reviews done, but in the chance that they don't, we may have to push. But that project's gonna spill over into 23 no matter what. There was always gonna be some cleanup work there, but we'll get as much done in 22 with potential for possibly all if the weather holds out and we get the right contractor, we may get all the mainline paving done and then have to come back in 23 and finish some trail work and do all the landscaping. But as you can see, that's a very large project. It's about 11.5 million total, including construction, design and construction engineering, as well as physical construction. You've been approving expenditures probably over the last 6 months for the utility burial. If you've been out there recently, you can see it kind of looks like a bomb went off. We've got a lot of work going on out there. Mid-American contractor finally got started, so that work will be wrapped up before construction starts. The poles will probably not come down until January or February, but they're gonna be out there working as long as they can. Yeah, Craig.
So the whole package is how much?
The federal aid project total is 11.5 million.
And then how much of that is local? Or
So
city money?
About 5.5 million. It's almost about a 50-50. We received 5.9 million from the state, but this was programmed in 2017 before TBK came about. So the original project, which was an 80-20, it was a 78-22, did not include any improvements to Middle Road. But with Competition Drive there now and TBK being there, we can't do just Forest Grove. There's no way it could operate.
Brian, is there any money left, for the technical committee for the Bi-State Policy Transportation Policy Committee? Would there be,
There is not.
because there's some more federal funds that were available, that's a higher number now.
We've already programmed everything out through 2025 for what's been
But
allocated
we
so
always
far.
change those things, so people come back with requests, not maybe as large.
So we have actually, at the tech committee, 2 years ago, I've been chair, I think, for 4 now. We made a change that we are basically a philosophical change that if it's a very minor change, we may consider it, but we're asking everybody to build in enough contingency in their projects that you're not coming back. They used to authorize up to 30%.
Yeah.
And that was really causing an issue with cash flow. So the funding is not there. We've allocated basically every dollar.
Okay.
So that is the big change for this year, but I hope everyone agreed that project is too important to try to scale it back at this point.
You gotta do it right.
So everything that's going east of Middle Road, are we anticipating that the property owners or developers are going to assist us with the cost on any of that?
Well, I think it's
I'll leave that
important
one
to
to you.
note too, though, that there was a significant cost in the right-of-way acquisition, or that we do not have to deal with. Mr. Kellner, when he replatted that just recently, that he dedicated a significant amount of land. I don't know what that dollar amount would have been.
We've saved about $700,000, not saved, I should say. But if you just take the acreage times 70 or 80,000 out there, it's about $700,000 worth of ground that's been dedicated to the city via the platting process for both sides. So something to keep in mind.
Isn't
So to
that our
Bill's point-
standard procedure
Yeah,
that when
for the-
somebody comes in and plats, that they
For the west side, absolutely.
give us that ground?
Yep, they were able to, they actually dedicated a right-of-way plat early for us on the east side because they're not ready to get to final plat yet, so we could keep moving on the federal aid. But yes, you are correct.
But to your point, Bill, to make that change, especially going out Middle, down Hopewell, down Forest Grove, all those that are coming in, when we approve those plans, are we getting,
Yes.
Yes.
you're
Yeah,
getting
and
the,
you would-
Getting the right
the
of
set
noticed-
aside, you're getting the right of way, then you're getting the cash set aside, the bond, something for their
So
portion of the
we do
road?
not have, so along Middle, we were able to because we basically had some precedents there. from Wyndham West.
Right.
When that was done. There is not to my knowledge, a formal policy that the city has, and I believe that was a goal-setting
Yeah, it is.
item to put that together. In this case, it wouldn't have mattered. It's federal aid. We have different rules.
I
that
understand,
We've got to follow.
but we've got
going
Middle Road and
forward-
Hopewell and all that coming, so let's
Yes.
get our policies so that we treat everybody the
Agreed.
same.
Totally agree.
Okay.
Agreed.
Yep.
I think related to
Yeah,
that
Bill,
discussion.
78 and 79, or I'm sorry, line 79.
Yeah,
If
line
you're-
78, 79, as
That
I
was
mentioned a few moments ago, the CIP contemplated a bonding amount of 10 million. That 10 million does not include line 78 and 79, which are projects that we feel are important to undertake while we're there doing Forest Grove Road. It would be an additional roundabout to the east, and other improvements in support of future development over on that side of the road. So as you can see, that's $3 million. So the CIP, as you see it in front of you, would require bonding of $3 million in total. 3 of it, obviously, for those 2 projects.
Jason, the problem is if we have somebody mobilize and come back out, cut all that stuff out after we just put in a new road, I mean, that's ludicrous.
Right.
There's no way to, that doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
As I said at the top, we have a whole lot of stuff that just kind of coalesced here in the
Sure.
next 18 months that we're trying to get done.
Yeah, it's going to be hard enough to figure out how to build all this stuff at one time because the Forest Grove project lays in very well from a staging perspective. When we start talking about, another $100 million development going right next door, trying to build at the same time, there's going to be people stepping on each other's toes. It's going to be difficult. But yes, that absolutely is the plan, is to try to minimize those disruptions.
But it does not contemplate going past that driveway, if you will, probably
Yeah, basically the
750
farm
feet,
farm
1,000
entrance.
feet.
Yep.
To the east. It does not plan on going to Criswell until the federal aid project.
Until some more money becomes available.
Right.
That we can.
Our hope is,
Leverage.
with this new bill, that gets escalated or gets brought forward. But our funding going over, that's probably another 9 or 10 million to move from that spot.
It was 9 million
to
get
Criswell.
Yep.
And
It's 11 now.
so,
By the time we get to it, yeah, I think that actually had a year of expenditure dollar, but yes.
so we're stopping at that new connection point, roughly 750 feet,
Yeah, we're
1,000
gonna
feet.
get, yeah, we want to get through the proposed first entrance and then taper out, and then we're back to our existing road.
But we did rebuild
Yes,
Forest Grove
and it's holding on very well. There's not a crack in it.
east of there, so we think we'll be okay.
Understood.
When do we know about the infrastructure bill that already passed?
Well, the
rules
problem
haven't
is,
been promulgated yet,
Funneling to the state
and
already.
some of it hasn't been appropriated, so we're on it. And they've gone, there's a couple seminars that they've been part of, MRCTI, I've been through 2. We have conversations with them that I bring everybody, staff into. We don't have our specific rules yet.
and if it comes to the state in the typical funnels that it comes through, either STP or STBG,
DBG.
STBG, we don't know what that allocation is yet and what our share of that would be. And then that's typically done in a countywide allocation. So then we parse that with Davenport, Scott County, and us. So we'd have to negotiate that as well.
Just like we do our normal competitive projects. That's
So-
how I anticipate it'll.
Unless there's a way for us to get into a different bucket of money, which we're looking at trying to do. Traditionally, I would say it only would move it up maybe 2 years, but I don't think you're gonna move it up 5 years.
And I think we probably have a larger discussion of, and some of this will lead into the next couple, of where our priorities go a year or 2 from now. Forest Grove is in my opinion, is in great shape east of there, and the traffic doesn't warrant expansion yet. I think we probably need to start looking to redo Middle and head south, especially if this east side development comes along. So we've been talking about Forest Grove for forever, but we've kind of done a really nice job, I think, of getting ourselves to a point where we could look elsewhere, because we've got $40 or $50 million worth of reconstructions and widening and expansions between Middle, Criswell, Forest Grove, and even Indiana eventually. So there's still a lot of work out to be done, and it's with TBK and all that growth and traffic. Some of this stuff's gonna change our priorities
Understood.
So
Questions?
speaking of that, lines 80 and 81 are two new projects that have been added that were not on the 5-year arterial last year. So Indiana and Criswell are both, because of the increase in overall traffic, are really performing poorly. That seal coat is taking a beating. It's starting to look like Forest Grove was. So what I'm proposing in the 2 out years there, and again, they're out years, so they're not direct impacts now, but would be to do exactly what we did on Forest Grove. So that's where we chewed it up, the existing material, utilize what's there, you supplement it with some additional rock and materials, and you cap it with asphalt. And that'll buy you 15, 20 years. So I wanted to point those two out specifically because I don't think we're gonna be able to last much longer on Indiana or Criswell. I know you guys have been aware of what the condition that we've had on Indiana and what we've tried to do out there just hasn't worked. There's just a lot of oil in that. And Criswell, I think all the truck traffic with all the new homes being built, new subdivisions is really taking a beating. There's
And the
some,
concrete people that aren't supposed to be driving on it, driving up and
That,
down 11 trucks at a time every day.
Is that essentially what you've already done on either side of the bridge on Indiana now?
so
Either
that,
side of the bridge is asphalted now.
that was actually full depth asphalt.
Is it?
That's a full
Yeah.
depth asphalt
Yep,
section.
it wasn't, that was done as part of the bridge project, but it would be exactly what we did on Forest Grove. It's a great project, utilizes what's there. It's probably 20 or 30% of the cost of totally redoing it.
What do we attribute the additional traffic load on Indiana to? Is that the
That one's
growth in
really
McLaren?
surprising. But it is, when it was closed for the bridge, if you sat up at the top of the hill there and saw the number of cars that refused to believe that it was closed and would still come down and turn around, I was amazed.
Really?
It's upwards of 3,000 to 4,000 cars a day that Indiana's seeing.
There's a lot of people that live in Bettendorf that work in DeWitt,
Clinton,
Clinton, stuff like that. They want to live here but work there.
vice versa.
Owning that property off of 240th.
Yeah, I know you drive it
There's
frequently.
7 a.m. in the morning, that place is screaming with cars. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
So that did precipitate some changing of the rest of the CIP and just moving around the pieces. Nothing got taken out, but might have had to shift a year here or there because those really, from a functional standpoint, are failing. They're getting close.
Is Criswell, is that a share with the county?
That would have to be, yes. Now I think Decker's had a conversation with Mahesh. I have not talked to Angie about it, their engineer, but I would think at that dollar amount that they wouldn't have any issue.
I've talked to Mahesh. He understands it. They haven't programmed it, but I think they're waiting for us to program it and,
Send it to them.
yeah.
And this would give them 3 years at that point, 2.5 years to work on that one.
Jeff, you had something to add?
I would just add on Councilmember Connor's question there a little bit. With the junior high school being out there where it is and that being a route, I would guarantee you that at least 400 cars, if you count round trip a day, are coming from the junior high school back into Bettendorf, utilizing that corridor.
Sure.
So that easily 400 cars a day if you look at round trip.
Yeah.
We need to try to get the county to take the area east of Indiana and at least get it seal coat. If we could talk them into doing it.
No,
It's not in our
all
area.
gravel.
It's not in our area, but it makes for safer travel and better travel for our citizens to the junior high.
Frank?
Brent, I think you and I or Brian maybe have talked to me about this. I think it's a losing battle on Indiana until it gets paved. I mean, really paved.
Yep, so that's.
Because it's a quarry to Bettendorf with those tandems, and they're not at the weight limit that's on those signs out there.
So this would absolutely take care of that. Now, it doesn't get you any expansion. It doesn't get you curb and gutter or anything like that. But it gets you a few feet. We've widened to 12-foot lanes, 2-foot shoulders, and it would have 4 inches of asphalt. And we've got 10 inches of rock out there. So it's a great base. Really a good project and a good technique to utilize for those kind of roads.
And what's important to note though too, is the fact that we feel with this process that we would do, just like we did on Forest Grove Road, we can buy 15 to 20 years, but then program it potentially into an SPDG project to get state funding if it warrants it due to traffic conditions or development.
And there might be the rural road avenue. So we have the beauty of being an urban and a rural, depending on programs. There might be an opportunity under a rural program
Yeah,
to
because we're
to
under
get
the 50,000 threshold.
to get funding over and above our normal SDPG. It's a different venue, so we ought to look at that.
Yeah, Bi-State's been a great resource,
Yeah,
and
sure.
they'll be the one that we'll rely on.
10 years to figure that out, because we'll be over 50 within 10 years.
So the other two, so really, we have 3 arterial projects next year. So Forest Grove being the biggest one. Line item, let's see here. 96 is the other large project. That is Tanglewood Road reconstruction. If you remember, we talked about last year with the site development plans and final plats for the Windmiller development, Tanglewood Place, the Dolan development, Quail Hollow, and then really the Dolan apartments as well, Tanglefoot Crossing, about the need to address Tanglewood sooner than later. So that is the other large reconstruction. So that'll go from Devil's Glen all the way to the Crow Creek Park entrance. It'll have a 10-foot direct trail on the north side. That was one thing we heard a lot of people in the, specifically planning and zoning. The why, I had no idea. The why takes their daycare, their kids, and they walk them down Tanglefoot right now. It's clearly not a safe condition to go access the park. And with all these new townhomes and new apartments, you're gonna probably see a lot of kids. And I know we talked about, providing a better access or more direct access to get to Crow Creek Park. So we'll have a sidewalk on both sides for that.
Is there a plan to continue that all the way down? I understand both
Right now,
groups
there's
of
not.
neighbors
Yeah.
are a little different.
Yep, I don't think there's been much appetite to look east of there. We might look at some other surface treatments for that, maybe something similar to what we did in Indiana. But in talking with some sewer issues with them, nobody really wanted to do anything to that east side. I don't think they want to encourage any other traffic coming through.
And there is an opportunity, we haven't talked about it, but there's about 11 homes at the far end that could connect to sewer, and we talked about a project there, and I think if you gave them the choice, they'd much rather get rid of their septics and
Then worry about seal coat.
then worry about seal coat.
So that is, and I don't even know if we'll get to sewer tonight, but that is in the sewer. There's a line item for that.
They pay half of that then, like our policy?
Yes, sir.
Exactly.
Yes, sir. And we've had a preliminary conversation with them, and they've given us a petition to consider.
Yep, I've got all 11 neighbors sign that, so I'm gonna get them out a letter soon. And then Kimberly Road resurfacing is another project. That's probably gonna expand just slightly. And we need to I'm talking with our colleagues, I wanted to get through tonight in Davenport to see if they want to participate. I would hope they would. But basically we probably will take those limits all the way from Middle to the bridge. Might require another 25 or 50,000, but our sections are pretty much ready. Yeah, Kimberly.
Yeah, keep in mind though, if we do this project and they don't choose to do it, then we would have a new road in Bettendorf, a resurfaced road, and they would just still have that beat up concrete street that abuts the Duck Creek, so.
Par for the course.
Same situation we ran into on Crow Creek Road. Or why we moved that. Yeah, Greg.
92, 93,
Yes, so 93 is the section we just completed.
right?
From Barcelona north there. And then mostly because of Forest Grove, we had to take a year off and we
No, that's
just
fine,
didn't have a
no.
dollar amount, but
That's
yes.
fine. But it wasn't 53rd to 56th already done?
No, we had to do some emergency patching
okay.
in there last year because it was so bad. Our
That's gonna be-
operations guys.
You gotta narrow it all the way?
That we're actually gonna keep the same width because we're over 4,000 cars a day on 56.
That turned out-
And
that
that
turned
many
out
are
really
coming
nice.
through there. So we're gonna keep that same width all the way to Barcelona and we'll actually probably have to do a little bit on 56th as well.
Turned out nice.
Great. Yeah, that we were able to narrow that and I agree. It turned out really well.
That's something that we would envision as well on 29th Street,
Yep,
which will
that's
eventually
right.
be reconstructed. To narrow that, there's no reason to have it. I believe it's 44-foot wide. We would narrow it down to a 31-foot cross-section, very similar to what you saw on 18th
Exactly.
Street.
Okay, then I also wanted to point out line items 98 and 99. That is Central Avenue resurfacing, and that is the entirety of Central Avenue. We were, just a month ago or so, awarded STBG dollars for that. So just over 1.7 million. That is slightly under the 80-20 as well, so 80-20, is generally the standard, but with as many projects as are being submitted and the limited dollars that we have through Bi-State, Iowa Quad Cities gets about 4.6 million a year. And there's usually anywhere from, if we do it, we try to do every 2 years, so that way we're not doing this and programming one project. But the cities are working really well together at the technical level, and we've all kind of agreed at times to take a little under the 80%, so that way all of our projects can get funded. So in this case, I think it was a 75-25, but the county, Davenport, us, and Leclerc were able to get projects funded over a 2-year period. So very happy with that dollar amount, and obviously a much needed project there.
And the
Why is it that far?
really tough portion of that is from basically 23rd East.
Yes. Yeah, I've dug up all the
Wanted to
old
break it
plans.
into 2 projects.
Still not quite sure what was done. There's a lot of varying asphalt sections through there. There's some reasons why some of it isn't holding up. There was a lot of old asphalt on there that didn't get taken out previously. So something that we are doing now. Anytime we go through there, we remove everything. We're not overlaying over older material.
And our hope here is that the dollars that we talked about with the new program will increase enough substantially that this will move up. I don't know that it moves up 3 years, but I would expect it to move up at least 1 and maybe 2, depending on.
So we were awarded the money, but we were awarded the money 3 years from
It's
now?
in the 5-year program.
Yep, so we have to program out several years, exactly.
You're authorized, you're not appropriated.
Yeah.
And it becomes a matter of cash flow for bi-state. So if there's a project in front of us that gets delayed or takes a little longer, we may be able to move that up. That actually happened with Forest Grove. They had enough cash sitting around in the STBG account to where we got the engineering started, which kept us moving.
Brent, I'm not sure where this one was, but Greg had asked me about 53rd between Middle and Devil's Glen, where we fill in those lanes.
Yep, that is line item 95. So that is in, seems like it got split, but basically the out years of the program. So still in the 5, but it's in years 4 and 5.
And remember that when we acquired the property, a number of those parcels took ag deferment, so they don't get assessed. So that fell back on us, and that's why there's gaps in there. So again, drafting that policy to try to avoid that, but there's state code relative to ag deferment when no road exists and you're going through and it's farm ground. The owner of that ground can take 10 years to ag defer. If they take the 10 years, you can't assess them.
The nice part is we're probably not going to have many more situations where we don't have the road exist.
Right.
So I think a lot of these will be tied to development, subdivision development, in which case you're not going to run into the assessment issue.
Right.
All right. Anybody have any other questions on arterials? So that map is also included in there. So if you do, feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email.
40 minutes, huh?
Traffic, not much in
Taylor
here.
took 25 more than he should have.
We want to rip through this. We've been trying to do one signal a year, complete replacement. We've got I74 and Middle Road that will be done next year. That actually was programmed for this year, but because of the length of the detours, we weren't able to get in there and do it. So that money is kind of some carryover. And then
Have
middle.
that on tomorrow night's consent agenda to purchase the materials,
Yes,
correct?
yep, to get the poles going. There's 8-month lead time on those. And then a much needed one next year, we believe, is Middle and 29th. So we are going to put a traffic signal, traffic at the golf course, and 29th has really come.
I've gotten a lot of comments from residents, not necessarily my ward, but people I know that they're concerned about Devil's Glen and Forest Grove.
Yep, I am hearing that more and more. It's a combination of things. It's still the wide open nature of Forest Grove. I know, Sergeant Champion's been out there quite a bit, running radar, using our DMS boards. Part of it is it meets the sight distance requirements. I actually had them double check it after initial count, but it's right there. It's right at the limit. It meets the design guide.
It probably meets it if people are traveling the speed limit.
Exactly. So I would absolutely anticipate something being out there sooner than later, even if it ends up being temporary in terms of the hung traffic signals to wait and see what a final determination, if a roundabout ever needed to go out there with how we're changing, but we're probably gonna need something similar to, Middle and Hopewell that we're gonna be doing in the spring.
Yeah,
You
that's
can't,
already
you
been
can't run
budgeted.
radar 7 days a week,
Exactly.
so.
So Middle and Hopewell, you already have the money for.
Yes, so we're gonna do all of, because that will be, when we go into a detour situation next year for Forest Grove, we'll have everything ready, poles in, cabinet, everything. We just gotta hang the faces and go. So that'll be done still yet this year.
The only other area that's been brought up quite often that I don't, and maybe something's already been done, I guess I don't pay attention when I drive by there. Middle and 14th has a ton of accidents all the time.
So-
And I thought that got brought up in a conversation.
Well, there was temporary signals back.
With Lincoln Road, I
Lincoln
believe.
Road.
Lincoln Road reconstruction.
And I think that-
DOT still has a base there,
That has all the infrastructure to it.
right?
And that thing's got, that,
Yeah, it's kind of surprising. I ran. It's tough getting out of there, but I had a signal warrant done 2 years ago, and I was really surprised. It did not meet the warrants.
yeah,
It met it met the peak hour volume, was it?
It could use a southbound turn lane. Because if you get one car that wants to turn south on 14th, it'll back 20 cars up.
But yeah, that is another one that we do continue to monitor.
But if anybody in that neighborhood is going
Lincoln,
west,
back and around.
they know to go over Lincoln Road.
Yeah,
to-
don't take that left. Yep.
To Kimberly or Middle.
Road is getting a little beat up.
surprised.
I know this isn't
I've seen at least.
hardware, but at some point I'd like to have a conversation again about the speed limit on 53rd. I know Davenport has lowered to 40 because I think of the
The Sophie Foster.
Sophie Foster stuff, and it's a speedway, and if they're gonna be doing 40, maybe I'd like to have just a conversation at some point about that.
Sure. Okay.
That's a speedway.
There's a couple larger line items in some of the out years. So the decorative light poles down here, the silver ones, are starting to get near a bulb replacement lifespan. So we're gonna start looking at that. We do have 6th and River Drive as kind of our next one. So there was a safety study that was done by the Iowa DOT in conjunction with both cities, Davenport and Bettendorf, and it evaluated that intersection and recommended installing a left turn lane for northbound traffic on 6th. We've already replaced one of the poles that fell over during the flood. So we've got some upgrades there. There's still one really old yellow pole there that needs to be done. Some pavement markings, and then upgrade some of the equipment there.
Where do you get that right away? It's
So
awful.
you actually don't need it. It's just the painted median would
Okay.
become, it'll be a really short, it's probably only
Okay.
50 to 75 feet long.
Okay.
But we wouldn't have to require anything else.
Brent, it costs $150,000 to change the light bulbs?
So as I've been told, and I'm not an electrician here, but if you look at how many poles we have, all the original ones, I don't think you can change just the bulb on those. I think it's the entire head has to be replaced.
It is.
Can we get one that we
That's-
can just change the light bulb on?
All the new ones, that's the case.
Is it?
So all the standard black ones that you're seeing in subdivisions, but this
The joke
decorative
in there
one is
somewhere
not.
about electricians and changing light bulbs, but, you know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's an expensive light bulb. Changing the whole head, I guess I get it.
And then line item 120, with all the increased traffic on Forest Grove, with the school opening now, we've got the rapid flash beacon crossing out at basically Huntington Meadows, Sterling Woods, so Spring Creek there, because that is the crossing location for the school. They're still having issues. Keith and Andrew and Rich and I all had a conversation about 2 or 3 locations that need to be looked at for some increased pedestrian accommodations, and that
They're
was
just gonna
kind of
walk
the
right
one.
across at right at the end of their streets. I mean, until something bad happens, but
So
that's not
it's-
what you've put together, I understand.
So
It's a scary thing.
That pedestrian improvement may end up just being a traffic signal, quite frankly, because all the subdivision development, I wouldn't be surprised if it meets the warrants. And in that case, if it's the same price as a pedestrian signal, one of these standalone signals, it's probably what we're gonna go to. And then line item 122, just wanted to make you aware, it's highlighted in bold. Our fiber optic network, we're starting to see some failures in certain locations in the oldest of the cable itself, the fiber optic cable. Apparently there is a lifespan on that material. Been told it's roughly in the 30-year range. And there are some sections, I believe, that are approaching that. We've got some issues. 18th Street's got some really bad cable there. There's a few other places. So just starting to look at some master planning and just wanted to get a number in there. Nothing that needs to be, we'll address the spot locations first, but the network as a whole has become so important and so large that we just got to make sure we're appropriately planning for any replacements that we might need. Okay.
Okay, boys,
Take
you're
Parks.
you're about into your grace period.
All right, I'll do a real quick summary of the last few remaining items. And we are certainly available to talk over the coming weeks
They get pissed.
as we ask you to consider this for a decision. In Parks and Recreation, we do have some splash pad funding out there in FY '23-24. That would require the issuance of a general corporate purpose bond. $800,000 there in total between bonds and sales tax would get you 2 pretty significant splash pads, we believe. Just below that, lines 133 through 135 is frozen landing replacement. Again, this would require a GCP bond issuance, and with some other funding from sales tax and gaming, we think we can put together $1 million for that replacement out there in 25-26.
That is for the coils. We're currently, so we got a new chiller, we got a new Zamboni, but the coils are the original coils, and they were tough to get in this year, and we don't think there's much life left of those, and new dasher boards. So they both need to be replaced. We knew that. So we're just trying to find our way in the sun on those.
The gift that keeps on giving.
On the splash
It is the
pads,
gift that
I think we're all excited about that opportunity, but if we're just gonna buy, finding locations, and I know it's not necessary, but if we get them, Kim, and you're like, this is where it really ought to be, and here's why, I'm all for it. But just like I don't think we should put money in buckets just to spend money in buckets in your area, let's not do it in their area unless if we have the places, we all want them. I think that's a good idea.
And then, thanks, Your Honor.
Don't interrupt if you want to go home early.
Line 137, more
How
immediately.
about 136?
136, Parks Master Plan.
How many of those do they do?
They typically did it every 5 years. I think we're a couple years past the 5-year mark at this point. But I don't know if Kim can answer that better than I can.
The last one was in 2017, so this would be more just an updating the current
Okay.
plan rather than a completely brand new plan. So this is more of just going back and updating.
I was gonna say, you're not gonna get much for 40 grand.
No, it's not, like I said, this will be more just updating the current plan.
Okay, thank you.
Line 137, we have increased park playground equipment and shelters budget to $500,000 beginning with next fiscal year on an annual basis. That would get you 2 very significant playgrounds or combination of playground shelters elsewhere. But with that investment, year over year for a few years, you'd make a huge dent in replacing the city's playground inventory. So
Could we move that to the 22 construction season instead of 23?
we'll take a look as we get a better picture of how sales tax is sitting. This is all sales tax funded items. And there's, as you know, Jerry, a lot of hands in that cookie jar. But as we get a little bit closer to finalizing the budget, we'll have a better idea of that.
Jerry, I just want to note too, that I'll be working with Kim though too. We understand that there's some potential grant opportunities out there as well that we will be looking into to see if we can offset some of those costs as well through some of these grants through the new infrastructure plan.
Thank you.
Got anything on miscellaneous citywide?
I don't think.
I'll just throw in line 151. We've got a staged replacement of all the riverfront bollards. They're holding on for dear life. Most of them are functioning at the current time, but finding parts for them is becoming almost impossible.
We put them in during the centennial celebration, as I remember. the Grand Illusion, or Excursion, I mean.
That was a long
Yeah,
time
that was
ago.
Grand Excretion. That was a good thing. We worked hard on that. 70,000 people didn't show.
Road use is most of our standard programs. You will notice the full depth patching supplement line item 1 was previously $125,000. DOT has cut that back to $75,000. I think we can actually thank our friends in Davenport who have been spending their money. As I've been told, they were previously not spending everything they were being allocated, so the DOT was giving it to us. Fortunately, they are been spending theirs, so ours got cut by $50,000 a year going forward. Now, we've done a lot of patching on State and Grant, and there's really not a whole lot left that we need to be too worried about there. We've got our full depth patch supplements and various programs. Pavement markings program has gone up a little bit. We've only got one contractor in the area now. Thankfully, they are a very good local contractor, but they're also a little more expensive than our previous contractor, but at least happy to have somebody that is here. Brian, do you want to point out line item 13 on the road use, the salt dome?
Yeah, the AccuSteel building that we have to house salt, the cablings were a galvanized steel. We've gotten 12 years of life out of it. It was done a couple years before I started back in 2012, so it's almost past its life, or it is past its life expectancy. So this would actually just replace the hoop structure that's out just south of the gas station that exists now.
We're gonna get stainless?
It's gonna be all stainless steel cabling and everything, so we're, with the new product, we'll get 20 years of life out of it.
Okay.
This beats $450,000 for an actual dome.
Palmer Hills be the next big section. Couple things to highlight there. You've got a GCP issuance for the 6-hole short course. That's line item 6. You've been approving a few expenditures for that for design and now construction inspection. Jason, you want to talk about 7 and 8, the range netting?
So from a risk management standpoint, we are now aware that the addition of the 6-hole short course could necessitate the expansion of netting around the range for the safety of players on the short course. So we've programmed that with a combination of sales tax and interest revenue, and then probably some funding from the risk management fund to take those poles up to 100
feet.
100 feet.
That we do have, as part of the Paul Miller contract that he has, they've got a consultant that does this, I guess, all around the country, is doing a trajectory study to try to give us an idea of what particular height needs to be used. We have not seen the final results yet. They've got to go back and adjust for the type of balls, I guess, that John's using.
Be a
for
lot
low
cheaper to
compression.
buy dead range balls.
Well,
They spend
that's
$500,000 to put more netting up.
Part of the problem is at 225 yards, we still have people that are hitting it rapidly over the 225-yard mark. And even if we go to restricted flight balls, there's still, we've had a couple people go up and do that, and they're still hitting them over it. So that's part of our worry is if we're gonna put people behind that netting, we wanna make sure that we cover that, so.
And then trying to find the appropriate coverage. Chris, if you could maybe speak to that in terms of, you know, the comfort level with trying to stop 100% of the balls versus, you know, maybe a lower.
Yeah, there's some interesting case law on, liability relating to golf courses. It's a reasonableness standard. We're not an insurer, but the design needs to be reasonable. We've had the architect or the golf course designer has been involved. He's aware of these trajectory studies. We're wanting to make sure that we are appropriately, that the designer is taking all information into consideration so that when it is opened, we are in a good position from a liability standpoint. So that's why, it's not, so the whole range of issues, including the ball type, the netting, the location of the range is all being taken into consideration to do it appropriately.
But that could potentially be another $500,000 that wasn't budgeted for the project.
It could be. I mean, we don't know yet what the trajectory report, we've put it in here assuming worst-case scenario. So we'll have to make a decision then whether or not the project moves forward. We budgeted it this way right now. We should have the report by the time we get to
Yeah. I think we'll have that
budget.
by the end of the year.
So we should have a pretty good idea what it says before you need to make a decision.
And then there is a placeholder line 3 for a expansion of parking and replacement of the existing pavilion, which unfortunately is the only place left to put parking. So we've laid out a concept, and I've got a small contract with an architect just putting together some budget numbers. So that's strictly just a placeholder right now. But it would be, a replacement with something that would probably be four-season use. So it would be heated and cooled and insulated.
The good news is our revenues are strong at the golf course and paying for the operation the last 2 years. It does not pay for the capital to the point you were, I think, making, Bill.
Yeah.
So that's a decision we're gonna have to make, whether that short course and the netting stays in place, whether the new pavilion parking maybe goes in front of it. So we have to just decide that. We'll know, I think we'll have a better idea for you by the end of the year what the report says, and then we can come back and we'll make a decision as we get ready for budget.
Okay.
I would draw your attention just very quickly to page 12. There's a section there in the middle of page 12 for splash landing. We do have a line there for your consideration over the next coming months, likely for splash landing replacement. Largely, the funding source there's other. It'll be a discussion, obviously, with council if that's the best use of our ARPA funding, as we've introduced to you over the last couple of weeks. So just note that that's there. Sewer enterprise, I don't know if Brent has any notes. This would be a year that we would issue debt in the sewer fund. I think at council's wish, exploring the idea of going back to a GO bond for sewer rather than revenue. It'll give us a little bit of interest savings. And our debt margin concerns from several years ago when we made that move to revenue bonds is not nearly as concerning.
Yeah, there's a couple of quick ones I'll point out. You'll see line 2, Forest Grove Sanitary Extension. That is part of that $11.5 million number. So if you remember when TBK came, we did not have the ability to sewer it down the west side of Middle Road. So there's a gap in the West Pigeon Creek Interceptor. So it stops at Hopewell. So TBK and that everything west of Middle should be flowing down that pipe. We were not able to obtain easements at that time through a couple of the farm fields there. So we had to go east. We have the capacity. We're not in any worry about being overloaded or backups. But with the east side now looking like it's going to develop, and actually as part of our project, what I'm going to do is go ahead and run new sanitary to get back to where we need to go, which is to the west. It's the property just east of Beaver Crossing, Beaver Meadows, I'm sorry, out there. And that's a former Hess property that was acquired by the Seitz family. They bought that piece and also obtained an easement so they could get sewer to their property from Hopewell. So we're going to work out probably a cost share and try to get that run in the next year or two so we can get the big 16-inch main up through the draw and up. Good. And then eventually we disconnect TBK. It goes to where it needs to in the next 2 years, let's say. And then that frees up everything on the east side of Middle to be how it was originally planned. So we've got that line item in there. Tanglewood Sewer Extension is line item 4. That is the one we talked about previously. Hopewell Interceptor, sorry, that's that's actually that line. So 2 and 3 are those two separate projects. 2 is what we'll actually do with the road project, and then 3 is filling in that gap between them. And then line item 5, it will be related to some potential development that's being looked at, and it's really just a placeholder right now. But we do not have sewer east of Century Heights along Hopewell, so we can't gravity sewer anything east of Huntington Meadows right now. And I think Mark made you guys aware that there's a potential development at the southwest corner of Criswell and Forest Grove. So as currently set, they would have to put in a lift station to serve that property. It'd be a similar situation to Auburn Court where we could abandon it in the future, but all that means is we have to maintain it in the interim, and then eventually we'd be on the hook to abandon that, just like we had to pay for on Auburn Court. We can gravity sewer all that area. There is enough flow there, or enough fall there, excuse me. So what that is, that's a placeholder to where if we wanted to, we could consider cost sharing with that developer to get gravity sewer, and it would also open up all the rest of the ground that's on the north side. I'll tell you what, I'll bring up the map here real quick. Might be.
I thought we were talking about getting those landowners together to maybe take a look at that as well, since you've got the north side.
So this is the proposed rezoning that's going to be coming in front of you. We have sewer basically right here is our interceptor. So what this would be is we could potentially bring it to here. They come down and meet.
Not showing up, Brett. Oh, yeah, not on this one.
It's showing up on our
As long as they can see
Yeah,
on
it's
the
showing up
screen.
on ours.
And it would also open up this entire area. So it's just a placeholder right now. You know, I know obviously there's going to be some big discussions about the rezoning of that property. But from an operational end, the ability to not have another lift station to maintain, you know, seems like it would be a wise investment at this point.
But you say the developer will cost share or do significant?
Yes, we have had preliminary discussions with them. They were actually talking about potentially a 75-25, city being the 25, because they know the cost that lift station is going to run them. So, and I think they understand that their project would probably stand a better chance, I think, potentially being approved with gravity sewer as opposed to a lift station. So nothing has been, we have not talked to any firm agreement, but they did throw out that potential cost share.
They can gravity sewer from there and have basements?
They do not plan on basements in theirs, but we would be able to with that if we did that as opposed to a lift station. Yeah, there'd be enough depth there because that interceptor that runs through Hopewell is 22 feet deep. It's got plenty of depth. Otherwise, the remaining programs are just our normal, and then are updated, you know, as we will update. Well, I guess we'll do back here. The pay-as-you-go and debt financing, if you remember, we had to reformat the CIP to match what we're doing now at the wastewater treatment plant. We will approve that budget in March, February, and then we'll update that, but shouldn't be any big changes.
We should approve that in February so
February,
that the
yes.
council sees
It's
it
February,
in
I'm sorry.
budget.
It
It
is
is
February.
actually.
Thank you.
It's already on the calendars. I guess
Thank
the only remaining line item, line item 13, we do have the completed McClure SSES study, the I&I study, and it's identified about $22 million in I&I or potential I&I removal projects. So obviously a much larger discussion. It's sitting there. You know, we are mandated by the DNR to. We don't have a dollar amount, we don't have a percentage amount, but we are mandated through the consent order to be doing I&I removal. And I think we need to be doing more than the $500,000 every couple of years that we're doing in lining, but there's a big difference between, obviously.
And there's a lot of good money available in the
Obviously,
package for
you're not
that
gonna have
too.
a system that's, has no I&I.
No, absolutely. There's certain
So where are we
areas.
above reasonable?
I think there's a peaking factor that they talk about, which is, you know, your dry weather to your wet weather of, you know, 4 to 5, and I think we were at 7. So there was 2 to 4 million gallons a day that they identified that we could take off our system. Now, something else to keep in mind, that's extra capacity that we build in for future development as well. So there, we do have a couple lines that are hydraulically overloaded. Our sewer down through Duck Creek is basically maxed out. It's not backing up, but it's at capacity, and we've got a fair amount of I&I in the first ward, as you'd expect. You know, older pipes, unfortunately. So a much larger discussion to come.
Those are your alleys.
Kind of goes hand in hand with Jason's rate study.
Make a choice.
Keep in mind, though, as we reduce the I&I in the system, we reduce our costs at the plant that we're actually paying for treating.
Yeah, everybody's paying to treat clear water. So I believe that'll be a small briefing in the future to take a look at that. And it would be SRF funding, you know, whatever we would do, so that you can't beat the
And so
terms.
there's some other grants available too that,
Yeah, a lot of sewer money, so
so there's some stuff that we can get to.
And I think many of these sewers are actually in the alleys. So when you dug up the sewer, you could repave the alley when you put it back.
we have been televising all the sewers as we go through. So if there was a problem, we would have already fixed it, thankfully. A lot of them are down the center of the roads. Not that many in the alleys, but right down the center of the roads.
But I know like, where the old Jefferson School
Yep,
was.
we did that one,
That was a
exactly.
perfect example where you went down the middle of the alley with the sewer.
Yep, it was a 105-year-old pipe, I think. Stormwater fund, a couple things. We'll finish real quick here. Detention basin upgrades, line item 2. That is the funding of what'll be the Haley Heights detention basin. So the property that was acquired from Ben Eastep is under design right now to expand detention there. They're looking at the entire detention system through there. So that includes our existing wet pond, this piece of ground, and the Haley Heights pond that's owned by the subdivision to the south. I would anticipate us trying to combine those ponds, and the city may take ownership of that one completely because it really functions as one system. Beyond
Really
that,
not a pond, it's a wetland.
yeah, the dry basin, correct. Our normal programs through there, line item 12 was added in. That is the sump pump cost share. That's just an assumed number. You know, that is gonna vary depending upon the number of subdivisions that we have and the number that actually require it, but definitely a good thing to be adding in there. And then line items 13, 14, 15, stream bank stabilization. You'll see some larger numbers in the out year. That is, I'm gonna say a catch-all for both stream bank stabilization and potentially detention basin retrofits. So we kind of lump those all into together, and those dollars will probably be allocated a little further as we get into those out years. And we went more than 40 minutes, so I am
Yeah,
sorry.
you're both fired.
The Sophie Foster development,
Yes.
wasn't there supposed to be a detention pond at the southeast?
Yep, so there are 2 ponds on that. As they're processing through, they've been sending me over some plans.
Okay. So we kind of keep an eye
We're
on it.
maxing out everything we threw there. We took a look at all the sewer, because all the sewer flows through us as well. So yeah, they're keeping us in the loop.
So, Your Honor, we didn't have any decision for you tonight. We would bring this back, we think, in 2 weeks to try to get to a decision to tell us the debt number that we can work at. So our suggestion is you visit with Jason and/or I, mostly Jason, but we can do it together, and go over any of your concerns. We'll talk about cash flows with you because it does change the cash flows for a couple of years, because primarily we're front-loading a number of these projects. So it changes the amount of debt that we're going to issue. And I know a couple of you might have had some thoughts about a 2-year issuance. So we'd certainly talk about that as well.
We're gonna tee up Scott Webster for that, since we kind
Yeah, I
of
mean, I think
talked about it and dog
Already
and
blown
pony.
your 40 minutes.
if there's any year that you could guess that interest rates would have a chance of going up, it would be this year. And I think it was smart to do when you did it because you thought they were gonna go up. But would it be something that we could look at doing? At the same time, I know that I had talked to the mayor about it a little bit. We have to make sure that we spend the money within an appropriate amount of time too. So it'd probably take a little bit of work with Brent to make sure that we do it, but it's something that maybe I would appreciate if you could at least look at.
Absolutely. I agree with you on your assessment of the interest rate market. And I would certainly recommend that, you know, just as we have for several years, recommend that we get as much as we can done with low interest rates. So I will explore that this week. Thank you.
Let us know. Obviously, as you put it back into that calculation for debt ceiling margins and what the actual debt is, because one of the things Scott always talks about is each year as we bring money in, why are we spending more? Why are we doing a deficit accounting just because we can offset it later or we think we can? It's one of those things that it's a balance, but to Scott's point, it's certainly a concern as inflation is clearly hit in many areas. Some of the materials have started to come back down, thank God. But if we can get money cheaper and starve off the inflation,
I
it
think
may
the
be something to
only-
consider.
Off the top of my head, the only limiting factor will be, can the $5 debt levy service the debt?
Yeah.
Service that much more debt early on. So that'll be the calculation, but
I
I'm
guess my
happy to take a look.
I had honestly, I had a question off of that. Can you bond enough to cover your percentage that, I mean, you gotta hold it for an extra year.
holding cost.
I get it, the holding cost that's in there, but you typically would probably save more than the holding costs just in your fees of issuing bonds. Could you do it that way to help the $5 debt levy be
There's some
able to?
different ways you could structure the debt. You could do interest-only payments for a year or two. So I think we can maneuver that.
And then the other question is, what's on the sewer work, what's it do to the rates? The customer rates?
The work that you see in the CIP over the next year or year and a half sticks with the plan, the 4% plan that we've shown you for several years now. When we start talking about $22 million of I&I and millions of dollars at the plant and millions more up north, that's where I've got Baker Tilly actually working on a rate study as we speak. So hopefully we'll have a good understanding of that by budget, if not long after. And we won't be asking you for a decision on those projects or those rates come March or February or March. So
No, that'll be somewhere in the future. And
Yep.
to Brian's good point, if you spend it in I&I, you're gonna reduce it at the plant. Although we now have more people, so our percentage of the plant will go up. It's lots of levers, right?
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
I know you're on top of it.
Yeah, we gotta look at what's 22 million by us.
Absolutely.
So, I mean,
1%?
you gotta take
Or
a look at it,
82%?
yeah.
Now we better start talking, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Anything else on the presentation of our 5-year CIP? All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank your staffs. Good work. Let's move to remaining consent. Is there any other remaining consent agenda item any particular council member would like to discuss or ask questions about at this time? I'd like to entertain a motion to approve all consent agenda items for consideration tomorrow night.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any operational items on tomorrow night's agenda any council member would like to discuss at this time? Very easy operational agenda. Seeing none, let's approve that agenda at this time, please.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I have no items to add tonight. Does any council member have an item to add? Thank you to all who helped us with 'Tis the Season. It was a great event. Wednesday was fun. I can't remember what we did all day Wednesday, but we liked it. I-74 bridge.
Michelle, do you want to say something about that email that you sent out to everybody?
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
We won the best balloon handler costumes again for the Festival of Trees Parade this year.
Yeah, baby.
Thanks to all the hard work at the Family Museum and the float that they created us, and the great minds that came up with all the characters and the people that played those characters in the parade. It was really awesome, and we should be getting another award soon to add to our collection.
And our balloon stayed on the ground.
And didn't blow up. Burned down. All right, well, thank you all. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting. We stand adjourned. Good work, people. Thank you.
What they should have done was had the lady